Hello everybody. I'm putting together a series of videos of different craft projects that we can carry out while we're in isolation. So the first one I'm going to do today is decoupage. So I'm going to be showing you a couple of different methods of decoupaging, what you're going to need and how we're going to finish our projects. So just to give you a few examples of things that we can decoupage and what they're going to look like when they're finished, I've got a few that I've made earlier. So we've got some jars that have been decoupaged. These have all been decoupaged with serviettes. Okay, so there's a jar there, another jar finished off with a little bit of string at the top. Quite a nice design on that one. You can also do bottles. Okay, we've got some nice little wooden items, some little wooden hearts. These are from the works, so they're quite easy to get hold of. A little wooden photo or memo holder there that you can pop whatever you want into the top of that. Now these have all been base coated with acrylic or gesso, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. You can also decoupage using old books. Okay, so there's just a little jar there, again with a serviette on top, and a bottle. Nice little vintage design on that one, quite like that. So what you're going to need is something to decoupage onto. I've chosen to do a couple of jars today. If they're food jars, obviously make sure they're clean, rinsed out and dry. Make sure that any remnants of label or glue that's left on there is removed fully. You're also going to need PVA glue. This one's just from the pound shop, so again really easy to get hold of. Pop some into a little tub, a little yogurt jar there. We're going to need gesso. Now this is a really nice mate. This is from the works and it's really thick, so that gives us a much better covering. Just to show you how thick this is, I have to get it out with a spoon. Okay, there we go. So nice and thick. Pop some of that into a little tub as well, so it's easier to get hold of. You're going to need I call these dabbers, little sponges on the end of some stick there. You can use just normal sponge, just use a kitchen sponge and cut it up. Or bathroom sponge, just as easy. A sponge gives a much nicer finish. If you use a brush, it does tend to leave it streaky, so I find the sponges, the dabbers, are a much nicer finish on those. And you're also going to need a broad brush. Okay, how broad depends on what you're comfortable using or whatever you've got at home. So we're going to start off, we're going to cover the jar in acrylic. So it is literally, I'll just move that a little bit, it is literally just a case of getting some of the gesso onto the end of your brush, onto the end of your dabber, and dabbing it all over, just like that. Okay. You want a nice even coat, not too thick, not too thin. If you have a look there, you can really see how thick that is. We don't want it that thick, so we need to spread that out across the rest of the jar. Okay, I'm just going to finish that off. So that's the jar finished with the gesso. You can see there's a nice even coat over that. I think just one coat of this really thick gesso is sufficient. If the gesso or the acrylic you're using is perhaps a little bit thinner, maybe 2 coats would be a much better idea, so you can't see through it. So onto our second jar. Okay, and we're going to use old books as a background for this one. So what I've done, I've got an old book, torn it up into little pieces. Okay, the smaller the better. I'd say these are probably about 1 inch square-ish. Okay, so we're going to use our PVA glue. You want plenty of PVA on. Okay, so we've put plenty of PVA on there, put a little piece of our book on, and then very carefully glue over the top of it. It's really important to glue over the top of it so that the rest of the pieces stick. Okay, so we just keep layering this up until we've covered the whole jar. There we go. There we go, a little bit closer look so you can see. No gaps. I've done them quite randomly. You can put them a lot neater if you want to. I know some people like to do them so all the words are the right way up. It's entirely up to you how you do that. Okay, I'm just going to finish that one off. There we go, so that's the jar fully covered in the book. Around the top, because we're going round corners, as it were, around bends, you need to work it in really, really well so that there's no kinks or creases in the paper. So just go over it with your brush a couple of times, pressing it down really nicely so that there's no little bits sticking up. There we go. Okay. So what we need to do now is we need to dry them. You can either leave them to dry naturally or you can use a hairdryer or a heat gun. Just remember, whilst you're using a hairdryer or a heat gun, that glass conducts heat. Okay, so it is going to get really, really warm. So it's probably better off not holding it like that to dry it. Just leave it stood on a surface to dry like that. Okay, so I'm just going to dry these two off and then we'll have a look at what we're going to do to them next. So here's our two jars, nice and dry. Okay, ready to decoupage. That's the book one, and this is the nice Gesso one. Gives a nice finish to it, this nice thick Gesso. So join me for the next video when I'll show you how to put the images on and how to finish them off as well.